We did this last week on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt, kind of responded and reacted to a few things that Pat Narduzzi said at his weekly press conference. He holds his press conference on Monday, and we did this Morning Pitt last week where we kind of cut up a few snippets, 5 things that stood out to me that I wanted to talk about and respond to. And so I figured, you know what, let's do that again. And maybe every week there won't be 5 things worth responding to, but there usually will be 5 things worth responding to, I think. And they aren't necessarily the 5 most notable things Pat Narduzzi said on Monday, but 5 things that are of interest to me that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to recap and offer a little response to, a few thoughts on. So takeaways: offensive line, the cornerback situation, the rivalry, the backyard brawl. A bunch of things that Pat Narduzzi talked about yesterday are of interest to me, so now I'm going to talk to you about them today on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yes, Backyard Brawl Week, which is always cool and exciting. It's fun to have. I'm sorry that the audio was a little bit messed up yesterday, a little bit overmodulating or blaring or however you want to call it. I think it might be happening again today. I'm going to try to adjust it as we go, and hopefully it won't get too noisy for you. But it's Backyard Brawl Week, getting ready for Pitt, West Virginia on Saturday at 3:30 kickoff between the Panthers and Mountaineers. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are as well. I think Pat Narduzzi and his players and coaches are, and everybody in Morgantown. This is one of those games you look forward to, and I think nationally it's got interest. I think it's, if you're, I probably should jump into, I've got a Narduzzi clip about this, and I should probably jump into it and use the Narduzzi clip to sort of set this up and have this conversation about the backyard brawl. But I mean, I think if you're a college football fan over the age of 30, 35, somewhere around there, I'd say you're almost inevitably like familiar with all of the big rivalries, the big historic rivalries in college football. Those rivalries that have a name, those rivalries with a reputation, those rivalries between two schools that are close to each other. Everybody knows they hate each other, and it's usually pretty fun when they play because they tend to get a little bit fired up. And Pitt and West Virginia, the backyard brawl is certainly one of those games. And so I think it still carries some relevance, and it still carries some interest in, like, is everybody in the country going to be watching this game at 3:30? I don't know. I don't know what the rest of the slate of games looks like. We can look at that and see if there's other stuff that'll draw people's interest. But I think a lot of people will be watching this because there's a chance for a close game, a competitive game, maybe some fireworks, and generally probably some excitement when you have two games that sort of hate, or two teams that hate each other the way these two do. And actually, let's jump into our first clip here from Pat Narduzzi yesterday, talking about preparing for the backyard brawl and the rivalry. He almost sort of downplays it, and I wonder if you think that's the right call.
Oh boy, it's a rivalry game. I've been in a lot of rivalry games throughout my career, and it's just another one of those rivalries that happens to be Pitt versus West Virginia. So excited about that. There's a lot of hatred in the game. I think the fans hate each other, and I think it goes way, way back. I think there's, for whatever reason, lots of scars that people have that they haven't got over them yet. But for us as a football team, all the things in the crowd and the stands and what happens when you're driving on the bus, all that stuff really doesn't matter. It's what happens on that football field that's going to matter, in the team that stays focused the best on really what the task at hand is winning a football game. That's what we're going down there to do, is try to win a football game. And but we're not going to get all hyped into what the fans felt 35 years ago, 40 years ago. What happens on September 13th will be the key.
He says we're not going to get all hyped into what the fans felt 35 years ago, 40 years ago. I don't know, man. Kind of think he should. Lean into that. Maybe he's just saying that publicly because he doesn't want to give away how he's going to motivate his team and hype up his team. But that is what makes this rivalry. And there was another question at another point. I didn't clip this segment when Pat Narduzzi was asked about this, but whether the rivalries like this lose a little something with the advent of the transfer portal and players moving. If anything, I say that, I don't think it's made better by the transfer portal, but rivalries like this are what should survive player movement and NIL and all the things that have sort of, I think some people would say, plagued the sport over the last few years, because in the end, the rivalry is about the names on the front of the jersey, right? It's Pitt versus West Virginia. And you may have come to hate some of those people in the other jerseys, Pat White, Kevin Pittsnoggle, whatever it might be. But in the end, it's about one school versus another. Michigan hates Michigan State, Oregon and Oregon State, and, Pitt and West Virginia. These are rivalries that carry significance because of the schools more than the individual players. The individual players make the plays. I mean, some of the great games in the Pitt-West Virginia rivalry, I'm sure West Virginia people have their heroes in those games. But, I mean, you think about Scott McKillop against West Virginia in 2007. You think about the fact that Pat Bostic scored the only touchdown in that game in 2007. Or scored Pitt's only touchdown, I should say. A rushing touchdown, no less, from Pat Legs Bostic. You think about MJ Devonshire with the pick six to win the game a few years ago. You think Dejon Reynolds. Dejon Reynolds is going to live in infamy as a Pitt legend for a catch. I mean, maybe not a legend. That might be extreme. But a backyard brawl legend for catching that 40-yard pass in that comeback last season. I mean, some of these things will live on, and they're, the memory of some of these players is made by the rivalry. And even if, Dejon Reynolds was a guy who was here for 2 years, right? And he's not necessarily, someone that I think his name will largely be forgotten to history because he didn't really do that much, but he had a gigantic catch. I'll tell you who I can still reference: Jameel Brady. Jameel Brady played this weird, Pitt almost used a 4-4 in the 13-9 game with another stand-up outside linebacker. They had their 4-down linemen, and then they had 4 linebackers. It was basically a 4-4 defense. Jameel Brady was the guy who played that. And if you talk to anybody who was around at that time, you talk to anybody who watched that game, Pitt fans who followed it, people in the in the program or around the program, I mean, everybody remembers Jameel Brady. Otherwise, a forgotten player had a big game in that one. Tommy Duhart recovered a fumble in that way. The games like this create the legends. You know what I mean? Games like this are what sort of enshrine the individual players. And I think you lean into that history. I think if you're Pat Narduzzi, if I'm Pat Narduzzi, actually, and maybe I'll send this to him. If I'm Pat Narduzzi, I'm going up there and I'm talking about Jameel Brady. I'm talking about Dejon Reynolds. I'm talking about MJ Devonshire. I'm talking about Pat Bostic. I'm talking about Scott McKillop. Sean McKillop. I should re-record this entire thing for messing up Scott McKillop's name. I'm talking about those guys because that's what this kind of game. This is the game where legends are created, where players can firmly, like I say, sort of enshrine themselves in the memory of the fans because of what they do here. I think you lean into that. And I actually think Narduzzi will lean in, maybe not exactly what I just said, but I think he will lean into the rivalry as a motivation. Maybe he's not saying as much publicly because he doesn't want West Virginia to have any extra juice. They're probably going to be fired up after losing to Ohio last weekend. But I think, if I'm Pat Narduzzi, I'm leaning into that. And leading into the energy that the fans have. You talk about you don't care what the fans remember from 35, 40 years ago. I think you absolutely should. I think you probably do. And I think you want to feed off of that as well. You want the fans' energy to drive the player. I know players should be self-motivated and all that stuff, but you can get some extra juice from the fans. Let them hear it. Let them know about it. Pat Narduzzi did an interesting thing yesterday. When he walked into his press conference, he always walks in carrying a depth chart or whatever it may be. And he had a paper or two. And he starts off his press conference by talking about a bunch of MAC games. I think he wanted to make the point that Pitt blowing out Central Michigan 45-17 was really impressive. That they got into a one-touchdown situation and then they battled back, which I've talked about a lot too. I talked about it yesterday. I talked about it on the postgame show. I wrote about it on Sunday. And so I'm not saying Narduzzi's alone in that regard, but this was weird because he basically read a laundry list of close games between MAC opponents and Power 4 opponents, for the most part, that have happened this season. And I thought it was kind of weird. Check it out.
When you think about just the Mid-American Conference, I told you guys, you can get caught. A week ago, Central Michigan beats San Jose State. Ohio versus Rutgers a week ago. Again, this is something I fed to our guys, and they trust in what we're talking about. They get it, and they bought in. Ohio versus Rutgers, 17-31 at halftime, okay, which, similar score the other day. And then the final is 31-34. Ohio gets beat, to a Big Ten team. Kentucky, SEC versus Toledo. It was 10-2 at halftime, Kentucky. Ended up being a 16-24 game. Miami of Ohio and Wisconsin, it's 3-0 at halftime. Wisconsin's up. It ends up being a 17-0 Wisconsin win. Not kind of where you want to be. Buffalo versus Minnesota, it's 10-3 at halftime. Ends up being a 23-10 game, okay? So we could have found ourselves in the same thing with Akron, okay? It's 3-0 at halftime, and then Wyoming beats Akron 10-0. So and we could have been in that spot, and that's what I'm most proud about our guys, is they bought in. Like I said, we've had a detailed group. This whole since the spring, fall camp. I mean, they listen, they take coaching, they do what you ask them to do, and they did exactly like we as a staff asked them to do. So
I'm not sure what you're driving at here. Just trying to make the point that MAC teams can beat power conference teams. Yeah, we know that. I think everyone's aware of that. I guess he's trying to say, look, my team was able to hold off, take the momentum back, and then end up getting a 4-touchdown win, which is true. And again, like I said, I touted that a lot. I talked that up. That was one of the biggest things that stood out to me in that game on Saturday, is that they were able to do that. But it's weird that he kind of ran down that whole catalog list of games. I think, I mean, for the most part, Pat Narduzzi has done pretty well against inferior opponents at Pitt. There's a stat, our good friend on the message boards, Pugs35, has a list of how Narduzzi has done when he's a favorite at home, on the road. As a road favorite, Narduzzi has lost outright only 3 times, and I think he's only got 4 losses against the spread. He's like 12-3 outright, 11-4 against the spread, or something like that, when he's a road favorite, which Pitt is this week in Morgantown. But Pitt has mostly taken care of business under Pat Narduzzi. Obviously, the Western Michigan game in 2021 stands out as, one time they very much did not take care of business. I would contend that the next season's game, the loss to Georgia Tech at home, was almost as bad, if not worse. I think you can look at the 2 North Carolina games in 2017 and 2018. Those were bad losses. You could say the Toledo game, but it's a bowl game. You're missing a bunch of players. Bowl games are even wackier than they used to be. I guess, I mean, it counts. It was a loss to a MAC team. You have to include that. But I don't know. I put that one sort of half in this column and half not. And then I would say almost every loss to Boston College. 2019, they shouldn't have lost that game. It was final game of the season. Boston College had 5 wins at that point. 2020, they missed on a missed extra point. I think that was one of the few times Pat Narduzzi lost outright as a road favorite. And then last year's game, I don't know if they were the favorite last year against Boston College, but those are generally not good losses. But for the most part, we're talking about Pat Narduzzi against inferior opponents or teams that Pitt should beat. Like half of the ones we're talking about are against other power conference opponents, ACC opponents, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Boston College. It's really just Western Michigan and Toledo. I know they lost to Navy in the bowl game in 2015, but Navy was good. That was a good Navy team. My point is, Pat Narduzzi wants to point out how exceptional it was that his team did this, and my contention is that's more or less what they do. They're pretty good against MAC opponents. Really, just the one loss in the regular season, even though they've played MAC or Group of 5 teams and FCS teams every year, they only have the one loss. I guess technically UCF was a Group of 5 team in 2018. They were like a top 15 team or something like that. Are we really going to split hairs here, dude? My point is, you've done pretty well in these games and against these teams. We don't need the list of how all the other teams have struggled. And like I said, I gave Pitt a lot of credit for how they performed after Central Michigan cut the lead to 1 touchdown. Got the big kickoff return from Kenny Johnson, the big touchdown pass from Eli Holstein to Raphael Williams. I don't think I needed to hear about how Ohio beat West Virginia or how Akron did against Wyoming or whatever it is to make that point. Offensive line continues to be a conversation piece. I've got a lot of stats. I might talk about this at length probably tomorrow when we talk about the biggest questions and storylines for the week. What does Pat Narduzzi think of how his offensive line has played through 2 games?
Yeah, I've been happy. Again, there's some things they did different. I mean, you look at even last week, you're adjusting on the run, but, San Jose, they lined up in 2 5s and a 0. Like, they didn't run any, only on a true passing down did they ever get into that same front. So they gave us a lot of different looks up front, which is great. I think our O-line did a great job at figuring all that out. We gave up 1 sack again. That's 2 weeks in a row. We'll find out if we get exposed this week, right? I mean, that's when you find out. We'll find out the next week after that, and the next week after that, if we can keep that 1 sack a game. But really, both sacks this year we shouldn't have gave up. Ryan thought there was a twist going on, but I've been happy with him. I mean, he thought he just overplayed an end going inside, and then he went back outside, and that happens. But I've been happy with the offensive line.
So let's talk numbers. Through 2 games, Pitt's running backs have combined to carry the ball 40 times for 199 yards, according to my math. And I think that's right. 40 times for 199 yards, just a shade under 5 yards per carry. That's pretty good. But, as we talked a lot about last week, and I'm going to talk about it again this week, I don't think yards per carry is a great indication, or even the total yards, 199 yards in 2 games. Oh, look, Pitt's running backs are getting about 100 yards per game, averaging almost 5 yards per carry. I don't think either one of those is a great indication of sort of consistent effectiveness for the running backs or the offensive line. Because you can break it down, and I've said this 100 times in the last week, and I think it's generally accepted among coaches and whatnot, that a rushing attempt, a run that gains 4 yards or more is a win. Right, and if you gain 3 yards or less, that's kind of a win for the defense. Out of Pitt's 40 running back rushes, 20 have gained 4 yards or more. So Pitt's running game with the running backs is, working out at about a 50% success rate. Now, included in there is a couple short touchdown runs, which are going to count as losses. Like in the Central Michigan game, Juelz Goff ran for a 2-yard touchdown, and Ja'Kirian Turner ran for a 2-yard touchdown. I think there was another 2-yard touchdown in the first game, too. And so those are going to count. But, you're looking at about a 50% success rate for Pitt's running backs. Desmond Reed, 18 rushing attempts. Only 8 of those have gained 4 yards or more. Juelz Goff, 13 rushing attempts. 7 of them have gained 4 yards or more, plus the 1-yard touchdown or 2-yard touchdown. And Ja'Kirian Turner had 6 carries in the other day. 3 of those gained 4 yards or more, and he also had a 2-yard touchdown himself. So you're looking at about roughly a 50% success rate, which I don't actually think is all that great. And then, you look at the pass protection, and Pat Narduzzi says, well, they've only given up 1 sack in each game. And those were bad sacks. They shouldn't have given them up. To me, I think the flip side of that is how many sacks has Eli Holstein run out of? According to Pro Football Focus, he has dropped back a total of 58 times, and he's been under pressure on 15 of those 58 dropbacks. So 25%, north of 25% of his dropbacks, he's been under pressure. He's scrambled a couple times. He's been sacked a couple times. He's obviously had some design running plays as well. He's scrambled a couple times when he was clean, when he wasn't under pressure, according to Pro Football Focus. And when you're getting pressure a quarter of your dropbacks against Duquesne and Central Michigan, I can't sit back, even though you've only given up 1 sack in each game, I can't sit back and say, wow, feels great. Feels like the pass protection's really good. I think it's been better than the run blocking, but I think the pass protection has probably looked a little bit better, and the numbers are a little bit better there. Again, simply because Eli Holstein is making plays. When he is under pressure, he's getting out and running, or making throws on the play, or making throws on the run as well. With 15 dropbacks, he's attempted 11 passes, or 15 dropbacks under pressure. He's attempted 11 passes. He's only completed 5 of those, which is less than 50% completion. He's thrown 1 touchdown, 1 interception. His numbers against the blitz are actually really good. We've talked about this, how Eli Holstein plays against the blitz. He's completed almost 80% of his passes against the blitz. According to Pro Football Focus, he's thrown 3 touchdowns in those situations. But, I'm with everyone else who has some concerns about this offensive line, both for run blocking and for pass protection. And I think the numbers kind of bear that out when you're getting 50% success rate on your running back rushing attempts and 26% pressures on your starting quarterback's dropbacks. And again, you're not playing Clemson and Florida State right now, you're playing Duquesne and Central Michigan. That's concerning. Flipping over to the other side of the ball, Pitt had 18 takeaways last season. This year so far, they've only got one, crediting Francis Brew with forcing a fumble basically on Central Michigan's last play, and Kyle Lewis recovering that fumble. It's the only takeaway Pitt has through 2 games. Granted, they played a team in Central Michigan that was very run-heavy. Duquesne tried to get the ball out quickly, but I asked Pat Narduzzi about that. Are the opportunities there and your guys just aren't making the plays, or where are the takeaways?
We dropped one in the opener, so we should have had that one. So we dropped one in the opener, but the opportunities really haven't been there, in my opinion. But opportunities are when the ball touches your hands. Maybe we could have had another one this weekend. I forget, But the opportunity's got to be there. That'll happen. I mean, you look at a year ago. I mean, shoot, we didn't have any sacks. I think we came out of Kent State with 0 sacks. But what teams are trying to get the ball out really quick, and they're trying to be safe, and they're trying to protect the ball and do different things. So it all depends on what they're doing. I mean, last week it's hard to get many fumbles because they're packed in the box, and running backs running through with 2 hands like Larry Zonka back in the day. So it's when we're out there, we're trying to punch balls out, but they're not coming out. But we've had maybe a couple opportunities on quarterbacks that we'd like to maybe get the ball out too. So that's something we work on a lot. And I think, we'll see what happens the rest of the season, but I think our defense is one of the best at just trying to get the ball out right now that I've been involved with in 10 years here at Pitt.
So he says there have been a few opportunities, but not a ton. I do think the takeaway numbers will come. Last year they had, like I said, they had 18 total takeaways. I think they had 4 fumbles and 14 interceptions. I just want to double check. No. Fumbles, lost 5 fumbles and 13 interceptions. I think those numbers are going to come. I don't think, I don't think Duquesne and Central Michigan are a great indicator of how this defense is going to take the ball away. I think they'll be good at getting the ball. I think they'll be good at getting interceptions, and I think they'll be good, particularly because I think they're going to get pressure on the quarterback better and force more of those errant throws and interceptions. And then we'll see what comes with fumbles. Sometimes fumbles are just luck. You can try hard to sort of manufacture your own luck there, but for the most part, I think they're kind of luck. But it's something to keep an eye on, and that's why I asked Pat Narduzzi yesterday, like, are there opportunities and guys aren't getting it, or is it just a product of who you played? And it sounds like it's a little bit of both, but he does feel like those opportunities are there and will come even more. And then the last thing, cornerbacks. The cornerback situation, Pitt. Didn't have Rashad Battle on Saturday against Central Michigan. My guess is they won't have him this week at West Virginia, but we'll see. Tamon Lynham left the game early with an injury. He was limping off. We'll see how severe that is. In place of Battle, Shadarian Harrison got the start, and then when Lynham came out, Sean Lee came on the field, and basically those two played the entire game up until like Central Michigan's final drive when I think they brought in Nigel Maynard or something. A lot of reps for 2 unproven guys in Shadarian Harrison and Sean Lee. Harrison, a redshirt sophomore, seeing playing time on defense really for the first time in his career. Sean Lee being a true freshman. How did those guys do against the Chippewa?
Being that, again, we say we got 4 starters, 5 starters, whatever. I mean, you can talk 1s and 2s, but the majority of that game we played with our maybe, if you want to call them backup corners. I thought both of them did an outstanding job. Not only in the pass game, but in the run game as well. Obviously, things we can clean up, but, I was happy. I mean, I've told you since August that Sean Lee's a football player, and we've talked about drip since spring ball. Shadarian, that is. So, I mean, those are 2 really good football players.
The real question, and I should have asked it yesterday as we were talking about the corners with Pat Narduzzi, is where's Rashawn Murray? The Cal PA transfer, 5th-year guy, 4th-year guy, whatever. He's a senior. Played last week against Duquesne, played on special teams against Central Michigan, but never got on the field on defense. So I don't know what's going on there. I'm guessing if there's something going on, if he's not picking up it as well, or he's just behind Sean Lee, which he was behind Sean Lee in the Duquesne game too. When they had to go to another corner, they brought in Sean Lee. He was the guy who got the call off the bench ahead of Rashawn Murray, so maybe the true freshman is outpacing the Cal PA transfer. But it's a little surprising that when they got into a situation where they had to play with Harrison and Lee were the top corners they had available, they didn't get playing time for Murray. I'm a little bit surprised by that. We'll see what sort of develops there. My guess is they'll have Lynham back and not Battle on Saturday, which means Harrison will probably start again with Lynham, and then Lee will rotate in. But will Rashawn Murray be part of the rotation after that, or Nigel Maynard? We'll kind of see what develops there. So those are some of the things that stood out to me in Pat Narduzzi's press conference yesterday. You can watch that video right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, or you can check it out at Panther-Lair.com. We have the transcript up as well if you want to read that. Jim's got his takeaways. That'll be out this morning of what stood out to him in Pat Narduzzi's press conference. We got lots of coverage all over the place for you at Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. We've got our live show tomorrow night. We'll have our post-game show after the West Virginia game on Saturday. Looking forward to that. That's going to be a fun one. No matter what happens in the game, the post-game show is going to be, as the kids would say, lit. I think. It'll be well lit. I'll have all the lights on, so it'll be well lit. All right, thanks for tuning in today. Hope your week got off to a great start yesterday. Enjoy your Tuesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.